I'm back with Toby Haberkorn, and Toby is, as I've said, an experienced executive search consultant and a certified job strategist. And we've been talking about some of the things that you run into when you are over 60 for job searching. And we left off talking about networking. And I happen to be networker supreme, and I love to network. And there is a way to network. Now, Toby, you talked about telling everybody in your local arena, whether it be job, friend, family, church, whatever. And I talk about how you network. In other words, how you present yourself to other people, how you do your 30-second pitch, how you have to look at the person and be sincerely interested in them and not be watching who's walking in next who you're going to talk to. So talk a little bit about why networking is so important and the proper way to do it.
Well, one other important aspect about networking is the golden rule. As much as we might be interested in finding that next job, and it occupies all of our thoughts, the most successful networkers apply the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And by that I mean they share leads and referrals with others. They become a resource. They are interested in other people's searches, so that when the right leads and the right referrals come along, people are ready and wanting to help them. So by being interested in someone else's search as well, first of all, you're helping yourself because you are concerned with something that's a little bit outside of yourself. But in addition, people respect and respond to someone who is always ready to help.
That's a really good viewpoint of it. I had a friend who actually was in sales and was always the number one salesperson in all the time for his company, and they kept trying to promote him to being a manager, and he would not accept the position. He said, "I would be a lousy manager. I'm really good at sales. That's what I do well. And I don't want to be a manager and be responsible for people or for reports or for any of these other things." However, what he was also very good at was connecting people. And one of the reasons he was always the top salesperson was because he connected people. For example, if I just, let's say, would know him, but necessarily have a business deal with him, but he knew that you, Toby, and I, Gayle, would be a good match, he would introduce us with no expectation of anything back. But when somebody does that and something comes out of it, you're going to remember who the introducer is. So that's a form of networking. It's called connecting, but it is a form of networking. And networking is a really key importance. And again, when you do have your 30-second pitch, it isn't to really just regurgitate over somebody. It's enough to say whatever it is you have to say so that the other person wants to say, "Tell me more," so that you can then get involved in a meaningful conversation. So networking is important. Would you say that there are ways to network other than in person?
Yes, I think LinkedIn is a great example of that. LinkedIn is the premier business site on the internet. Recruiters and employers search for potential employees on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great source for joining groups, either of your peers or people or businesses that you can service with whatever skill set you have. But LinkedIn is an incredibly important source for a place that you should develop a strong profile. Another place that you can certainly network is your professional societies. Those are excellent places where you'll find people who are of like mind, have a similar skill set. And I always say that if you are looking for a position, volunteer to run the job bank for your professional society. That way, you'll hear about the positions first.
That is a really great idea. I never thought about that, Toby. That is a really great idea. Absolutely. If you're involved with the job bank, you will certainly hear about them first. And LinkedIn, and there is a whole methodology how you can work within LinkedIn to find out what's available and how you make connections. And it's also really, really, really important how you position yourself on LinkedIn. The story that you tell about yourself is key. So when you are putting yourself on LinkedIn, or if you're on LinkedIn now and you're wondering why you're not getting any requests for anything, look at the story that you're telling about yourself. I mean, it may be that you're not presenting yourself in the kind of light you should. And by really creating this really wonderful story about yourself and what you've done, not in a braggadocious way, but in a meaningful way, it will make all the difference in the world. So, what are some of the other 21st century job search strategies that you recommend, Toby?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Um, we are no longer reading the newspaper classifieds for job search. Those are gone. Today, just as we've discussed, networking is absolutely the best way. In fact, many companies have employee referral programs where they give their employees financial incentives to recommend applicants for a position. So that is one thing not to disregard, to remember. But the other thing is, let's look at the actual jobs or the resumes. Like today, you would de-emphasize your age by removing the dates from your education and limiting your experience to the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, now that's interesting. So don't talk about what you've done the first part of your career, even if
No,
it's meaningful.
no, do not.
Wow.
Go with your most current experience, which is 10 or 15 years. And here is another a fact that is extremely important. If you qualify for the position, keywords in the job description must be in your resume. Algorithms or ATS, applicant tracking software, count the number of times important keywords are in your resume. If they are not there, your resume is ignored.
Wow, that's interesting to know as well. But what happens now, Toby? I've got this great last 15 years. I mean, I am really terrific. And I go in because, they look and say, wow, this is some candidate. And I walk in, they take one look at me and say, well, what have you been doing the other half of your life? Because certainly
Well,
I've been in the workforce longer than the 15 years.
unless you knew someone, you'd probably go through a process. And I'd like to tell you just a little bit more before we get to the direct interview. You would
Sure.
prob you would probably undergo a telephone interview. And with the large number of applicants per positions, employers today are actually using the phone interview as the real interview rather than the pre-interview. By doing this, they can eliminate the majority of applicants and offer in-person interviews to a targeted few. So that interview has to be taken very seriously. Now, if you are fortunate, you make it through the telephone interview and you're granted an in-person interview. The first thing is you have to come in prepared. You come in prepared with your resume. You are prepared with how you can help the company, how your expertise fits in. You have to project energy. You have to project a youthful attitude and an updated appearance. And if appropriate, you have to be knowledgeable about social media and technology in your field. You also, again, have to demonstrate ability that you can work well with the younger workforce. But in addition, because prior to you getting this interview, they would have looked you up online. So was your online profile, whether it's on Facebook or other social media, is it appropriate? And are you comfortable with it? Is your email professional sounding? Do you have a texting plan? Because texting today is the preferred way of communicating.
Even for job interviews.
No, but they will talk to you at some point about it. They will send you a note, surely through an email, but even possibly through a text. But more than that, they want to know that you're up to date.
Well, it's what you're saying is really interesting because I think, again, it will depend on your tone of voice. It will depend on your enthusiasm and energy. But people who are older do a really great job on the phone because they've been brought up on the phone. Whereas a younger person today, I mean, very seldom you see them on their phones, but they're not talking, they're texting. You're absolutely right. So most, as a matter of fact, I have a nephew, he's 26 years old, and he doesn't even look at his email anymore. The only thing he responds to is either Facebook or texting. And I'm not a huge Facebook user. And so I texted him and I got like, I mean, it wasn't even 30 seconds, I got a response. So again, you need to be aware of how people communicate. And I really didn't text for a very long time. And then the people that I was doing business with, the people who I had to be in touch with quickly, those kinds of situations required me to text. So I got on board and I started texting. So it's really interesting that people go through all of these different things. And you might say, listeners, you might be saying, well, I don't want to do all those things. Well, then you're not going to work perhaps in the profession you want to work in or not get the job that you want to get. So if you do really want to go to work and you really do want these things in your life, then you're going to learn that this is how you have to communicate. So another thing that you talk about is once you're working, you should become a resource for other people. And why is that?
Well, first of all, let's assume you've been successful. You've found a position that you like, or you're volunteering in a role that you find very satisfying. Remember others who are not in the same situation that you are. And I think it's always good, and it's always the right thing to pay it back. And by that, I mean be generous with your time, offer advice and referrals. You can now guide and inspire. You are proof that mature workers provide the spark and the talent essential to continuing to make a positive difference in the work world, the paid work, and volunteer work world. So it's not age, it's what you contribute. And since you've been successful in finding the position you want, be generous with your time to others who are still on the journey.
Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes we become so self-centered that once we get the job we want, we don't think about anybody else or what they're going through. But there are a lot of people out there who really need work, and it's interesting as we see all of these different tragedies that are going on around us and weather influences and so forth. Your life can change in a minute. And you never know when what you have is taken away. I was at a seminar recently, and the person who was conducting it was talking about with the hurricanes and everything, how a lot of the utility companies do not have experienced linemen who can do the very tough, really high up lines that have to be connected. They just don't know how to do it. And most of the people who do know how to do it have been either retired or given a package to retire. and that the younger generation has not learned how to do these skills yet, which is why it's taking so long to bring a lot of these areas back. And I said to the gentleman conducting this, I said, well, I don't understand why wouldn't they train people before the other people left? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. They knew they would be leaving. They knew these other people did not have the skills. And it turned out to be a union kind of thing, which wasn't helpful to anybody. However, I think that sometimes when companies do, let's say, downsize, right size, offer packages, whatever we want to call it, they don't consider the brain power that they're losing. And then how are they going to replace that if they don't have experienced workers there? So it's a conundrum in a lot of different ways. So have you seen any trends that are happening now, Toby, as opposed to 5 years ago?
Yes, I think that although it is very challenging to find a position when you are older, it is certainly more possible today than you would have said 10 or 15 years ago. Today, with many people remaining healthy and wanting to continue to contribute, it's not as unusual to see a person 60 plus still employed or looking for a position. And I think many of us would say that our parents at our age, even at the same age, were a lot older than we are. So we are healthier as a group. We do not see retiring as the end all. We see refocusing. The other thing that I see are people who are in management and close to retirement will opt, if their employer is willing, to go back to a position that they worked in earlier in their career. For example, an accounting manager might say, I'd really like to go back to the accounting department as an accountant, not as a manager. So you ask, why would he want to do this? And the reason is, once he leaves this company, it will be much easier to find a position as an accountant with hands-on skills rather than managerial skills. So going back to an earlier position that you had in your career can make a big difference in terms of employability.
That's interesting. I really hadn't thought about that at all. So, yeah, just going back to of course, you won't make the money that you made, but then you won't have the responsibility that you had either.
That
So,
too.
that makes a big difference also. So, gosh, there are so many things to consider in all of this, Toby. I'm just wondering, if are there things that the baby boomers bring to the job market that the youth-oriented world of today does not, other than their experience?
I think so. They're more loyal to employers, and unlike younger workers, are less likely to job shop. And although you were talking about going to an agency for temporary work or part-time work, today's employee does not stay with a company very long, especially younger workers. I believe I've seen some statistics that it's under 5 years and closer to 2 to 3 years that a younger employee will stay with an employer.
Well, I agree with you there because, first of all, they don't have the patience. They don't want to go through all the stepping stones that we had to go through years ago. So they want to go, if they believe they're doing a good job, they're ready to move on to something else. You're absolutely
That
correct.
Yes, and we boomers will stay and are loyal. Another thing is we can do a good job with or without the internet and smartphones. I mean, if the internet goes down and our smartphones aren't working, we can actually research paper. We can make phone calls. And we can talk face to face with a person to get the desired information. I mean, we know how to talk, we know how to listen.
It is so scary though, Toby. You know, when you don't have electricity or when you don't have the internet, we are so dependent on it. I mean, I love to talk to people and I love to meet people. So I am a people-oriented person and I that's not a problem for me. Yet I know if my internet goes down or my phone goes down, luckily I have landlines as well. But if those go out of whack, I myself am kind of out of sort, you know, because I depend on it for so much information and so much communication and staying in touch. And then I feel like I'm twiddling my thumbs and I'm not doing the things I should be doing. So I can imagine if it affects a company, how that works out. What else have you found? Anything else that
Well,
stands out?
there are a couple more things. The other thing is we are better communicators, whether in person or in writing. We grew up in a workplace where personal interaction and well-written memos were required. So
Yeah, you know,
we
that
are
was one of
really,
the hardest things I had to learn in texting, Toby, was that, you know, when people sent me things and they said the letter U instead of YOU, you know, or the number two instead of TOO, I found that so hard because I was a champion speller, so it really got under my skin. Yet I find myself today when I'm texting, because I have so many, you know, I'm trying to do it so fast that I tend to abbreviate. The good thing now with the smartphones is that they actually know what you want to say before you say it. So they come up with those words right on your screen, and all you have to do is tap and it's there. But it's so funny because I had such a problem with that. I really did.
well, we're used to writing it out, but we have to keep up to date. And in texting, you shorten everything. And as you said, the texting program will auto-populate the word that you have in mind.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, first of all, let's tell people how to reach you, Toby. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you certainly can get my book at Best Job Search Tips for Age 60 Plus on Amazon. And you can reach me at my website, Toby Haberkorn, at tobyhaberkorn.com.
Which is Haberkorn, and it's
Yes,
Toby, Toby.
yes,
So the best way to get you is either at your website, which is Toby Haberkorn, TOBYHABERKORN.com, or they can get your book, which is the best job search tips for age 60 plus, and that's at Amazon, correct?
it is.
Okay, that's wonderful to know. So we have about 2 minutes left. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you would like to leave our listening audience with?
I think I would urge all boomers who are considering working or volunteering to know that the times have changed. 50 and 60 are not what they used to be. And there are opportunities. You need to know about them, whether you're reading my book, whether you're networking. There is a process to going about learning about opportunities. And I think that because the times are different, there are more opportunities, and we as boomers do not want to retire. We want to refocus. We want to be resilient, and we want to remain resourceful and continue to contribute to the workplace and the volunteer world.
Well, I certainly agree with you, Toby. I know I'm in about my seventh reinvention myself, so I agree with you, folks. My guest has been Toby Haberkorn. Hopefully, you've benefited from today, and go out and get her book. I'm sure it'll do you a world of good. Thanks so much for being with us, Toby. Really enjoyed having you. You've had the opportunity to get to know me over the last few years, and I'd like to get to know you as well. One of the things I'm offering is training for the media. I have a wonderful program that will get you ready for any radio or TV interview you might be offered. Many of you are doing wonderful things, but no one knows about them. Others of you are successful and wonder what's next. Whether you're in a business or have a special cause or a specific event you're promoting, media can help, and I can help you master your message so you can master the media. If this sounds interesting to you, email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com with media training in the subject line. I promise I will be in touch.